perspectives on independent cinema and global content. First, I would like to introduce our panelists. Next to me, Marie Zeniter, who currently works as Vice President of Global Sales at Utopia Films. Before joining Utopia in 2022, Marie worked at IFC, where she handled midnight and repertory titles, and Magnolia Pictures in international sales. Next to her, we have Jim Kolmar, who is a film programmer for the South by Southwest Film Festival in Austin, Texas, and the Trinidad and Tobago Film Festival. Next to him, we have Jessica Kiang. She's a Berlin-based film critic with bylines in Variety, Sight and Sound, The New York Times, Rolling Stone, the Los Angeles Times, and Playlist. And she's the international programmer of the Belfast Film Festival. And last but not least, we have Sébastien Chesneau, founder and CEO of Cercamon, a Dubai-based global film sales company with a catalog of over 50 feature-length films. He previously worked for many years at various sales companies, including Celluloid Dreams. So, I will save some time at the end for questions from the audience, don't worry. But first we would like to understand who is sitting in front of us. So please raise your hands in case you are filmmakers. Okay. What about festival organizers? Okay. Sales agents, distributors? Okay. Press? And students maybe? Great. Okay. Marie, I would like to start with you. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about Utopia, what kind of projects you're looking for. You handle Utopia and also Magnolia, where you worked in the past, are doing both sales and domestic distribution in the US. So please tell us a little bit about that, and also about tendencies that you can see in buyers in the past 5 years.
So Utopia is a relatively new distribution company that was launched in 2018 by Robert Schwartzman. We're primarily a distributor, a US distributor, and for some American titles we have worldwide rights, but I would essentially consider myself as a distributor. My role in sales means that I'm selling Pay One. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's essentially that I'm selling streaming rights for the films when they go to streamers. So that can be Netflix, that can be HBO, that can be Showtime. Our goal when the company was started was to be filmmakers first, which can be said of a lot of companies. At least a lot of companies like to define themselves as that. But the way we wanted to work with filmmakers was we really wanted to work with them on the marketing campaign, so the film would be portrayed to the audience the way the filmmaker intended it to be. We kind of promised to ourselves that we would never represent a film just because it could guarantee us a few more dollars. So we're very art house independent oriented. I think I'll talk a little bit about the films we've recently acquired now or later. Should I?
You can talk about Divinity, for example.
Yeah. So one of the most recent title we acquired is called Divinity. It's an American film that premiered in Sundance midnight. It's a black and white film shot on 16 millimeter. There's very few dialogue, but it's a wild ride. Elad actually played the film.
Yeah, we programmed it. What is the budget of the film? I'm curious.
Well, the film was produced by Steven Soderbergh, so they did not disclose that. But yeah, we fell in love with the film. We sent an offer immediately after the film premiered in Sundance, and we actually acquired worldwide rights for this one. The approach with this film is that it's a very unique film. It's relying on its visuals and on the music. It's a very immersive experience. So one of the angle that we want to push when we release the film. It's like it's something that you've never seen before. And once again, you know, it feels like you might have heard the same thing over and over and over again. But in some cases, and in this case specifically, it's true. So yeah, art house. We try to like push films that we really believe in, that we want to fight for, whether these are like English speaking or foreign language films. But we always take decisions together, and once we commit to a film, we never dump a film. We make sure that we work on it as much as we can.
I'd like to move to Sébastien. I want to ask you about your acquisition strategy, and in particular about two films, Safe Place, the film that actually won in Sarajevo last year. It's a very small film, and also about the Vietnamese film that you had in Cannes this year, which won the Camera d'Or, Inside the Yellow Cocoon Shell. Both films seem very challenging to market and position and sell. So what was the strategy, and is there anything you can do as a sales agent to make sure your film stands out in a huge festival like Cannes and kind of maximize its chances in winning a massive prize like the Camera d'Or?
So at Cercamon we do around like 8 films a year. I'm not sure it's working. Yeah. We do 8 films a year, mostly art house feature films. So we had the Camera d'Or this year, for instance. I'll tell you exactly how it happened on both films. It's a little bit different on Safe Place. I was in touch with the producer before. I saw the film, like almost final version. I loved it. Literally loved it. I was, on my seat throughout the film like this, and I called the producer and to tell her that I wouldn't be doing the film actually. Sorry, it's not working. No, it's better.
Yeah.
So I called the producer to tell her that I won't be doing the film. I was maybe too close to it and to the story, and I just couldn't do it, you know. And after a few weeks, I called her back and I told her, because the film really, really stayed in my mind, you know. I watched a lot of films, and this one really stuck into me. So I called her back and I told her, like, I want to do it, you know. So yes, it's a challenging film. It's about suicide, so it's not an easy one, and I knew. And I think the discussion with the producer was very important at that time, which was like to have the same expectations of what we're going to do with the film. I would also rather, you know, under-promise but over-deliver than the contrary. This is also maybe me, but I prefer to do it this way, you know, and then so everybody is happy at the end. So we did the film. It's working very well. We got some distribution in some territories, and a lot of festivals. It's winning all the prizes all over the world. So it's really going well for the film. I'm really happy about it, you know. So it's a challenging film, maybe like, you know, especially with this subject matter, like if you talk about the US and Japan, for instance, and maybe two territories where it's been really harder for me to get into those markets because of, you know, anything related to suicide is a really challenging topic in those countries culturally. So, but in other territories, you know, like I think I was betting on the fact that if I love the film so much, that I'm sure I wouldn't be the only one, and I would find at some point also some distributors, festivals to like the film as well. And this is what happened. On Inside the Yellow Cocoon Shell, which
we should mention, it's a very long film. Inside the Yellow Cocoon.
Yeah. It's a 3 hours film, quite slow also. So it's also, you know, it's also a challenge. But on that film, you know, like I'm doing a lot of sourcing on Southeast Asian films, and I knew about that film that was coming up, but I was actually I was talking to the producer back in the time on another film. We were negotiating another film, and I was so focused on the other film that it didn't cross my mind to ask him what he was working on another film. And it happened that he was working on that film too. And I watched the film. It was before the film got selected, was selected in Cannes. And I think I got the same kind of discussion with the producer, like we need to raise, we need to agree on the expectation of such a film. I knew the film would do well, at least on festivals. Would it go further then? Yes, maybe. But we need to work on it. And that's what the film got invited to Directors Fortnight in Cannes. And from there, everything went super fast. And I will answer your question when you say, how do you make sure, what's the difference maybe as a sales agent? You need to strategize, and strategize quickly in that case, deciding on the trailer, on the poster, how and when you're going to show the movie to your audience. So everything happens at the same time, or everything. And we organized a screening for the French distributors, because when you have a film in Cannes, you need to show the film to the French distributors, so they support you also during the festival, being in France. And really wanted to do a screening in a theater, because it's 3 hours long film, very beautiful shots, and you need to see it in a theater. So we managed to, and we were finishing the film at the same time. So it was really tricky. And the day before the screening, I had all the distributors coming from the smallest to the biggest. Everybody was invited. But honestly, the night before, the film was not even in Paris. We were trying to upload it. And once it was uploaded, it was zipped. So it was 3 hours more. So I had a terrible night, because, I was about to say to maybe the most 40 important distributors right before Cannes that the screening is cancelled in the morning. So I had a terrible night. But it happened. We had this screening, and I actually ended up selling the film to a distributor who was not in the room. So it's, although everybody else was. But then you need also to strategize ahead of Cannes. It's not about just your film's going to be in Cannes, so you wait for the screening. Especially the screening was late in the festival. So what we did, and I will link it to the press very soon, we need to show the film to the most important press people under embargo, and we organized the screening in London, so the major trade press could see it in advance before Cannes, peacefully, because when you're in Cannes, a 3 hours long film, it's difficult to focus, to see, and you're not sure you'll have that press. So we invited them. They screened the film in London, and I'll make it brief. And then we also, you have some tastemaker in the industry. We know that some people are big mouth. So we try to identify those as well, and we identify maybe 5-10 people that we're going to show the film before. And if we were pretty sure they will like it, maybe they won't go for it, but at least they will spread the good word of mouth. And this is when it started. You start a bit like this. So at some point it comes to the ear of a distributor or a festival that, oh, I've heard that the film is really good, and this is how it works. And I think I showed you the film before.
Did you manage to get reviews in all the trades? Because I want to move to Jessica, but I'm curious to hear about
yes, the most important ones, yes. But I think because also we did that screening in London.
Yeah. So moving to Jessica, I wanted to ask you specifically about variety, because obviously there are so many films that are presented in so many festivals, and the trades, they cannot cover everything. So could you tell us a little bit about what is the process of selecting which films are being reviewed at Cannes, Berlin, Venice, etc.?
Yes, I mean, I think it's interesting that Sébastien was talking about showing Inside the Yellow Cocoon Shell to the most important press, because I guess that's why I didn't get shown it. No, obviously another representative from Variety did see the film early in that.
That was for the joke.
Yes. But yeah, so I mean, one of the really important things, and especially for filmmakers and filmmakers in the audience, I know we all know how important it is for you to get a trade review and how much they can mean to to a burgeoning filmmaker. It is. I would love to be in the position where I just get to pick and choose what I can review and to bestow variety reviews on those things I think that are the most deserving. It's not really the way it works. My industry, the critical industry, is also entirely embattled and under threat, as I'm sure everybody else's is. So we have our own specific problems. I mean, in general, you will notice if you're paying close attention to the trades, the number of reviews that come out of even the major festivals has been shrinking year on year, and that seems to that's a trend I don't see changing anytime soon. So there is this very, I guess it's almost like a competition for who we review. And me as a freelancer, I mean, I write a lot for Variety, but I am freelance. So the system that we have in Variety, and I think it's pretty much the same in all of the other trades, is that the people who are attending mainly to cover for Variety, say I have a remit of 15 reviews that I'm going to be filing from Cannes. 12 or 13 of those will be absolutely set in stone. They will be handed down to me from my editors. These are the 12 films that you absolutely must review, whether you like them or not, whether you have any particular expertise that makes you good for that. So those are the 12. So at any given festival, and this is, I'm talking from quite a privileged position of somebody who's been doing this for quite a while, even the most adept film journalists will have maybe 2 or 3 films, certainly from the trades, will have maybe like 2 or 3 slots in their assignment list that they can actually use at their discretion to find something, to discover something small that isn't on that initial assignment list. And obviously that initial assignment list at a big festival like Cannes is going to be mostly full of filmmakers that we've already heard of. We have to review their new film or competition films. So sidebar films and smaller films and films that are from first-time directors who don't have a previous track record, a lot of you will be competing for those 2 slots that I will have, and maybe the other 3 reviewers will also have something similar. So there's a very small pool of reviews. So the first thing to understand is that I don't have that much power at all. I mean, I have no power whatsoever at all. But so when it comes to that, then it becomes a case of all of us doing it kind of for the love, because we will see the things that we are assigned to review specifically, and then for those last maybe 2 or 3 slots, most of my peers, most of the other journalists I know, or film critics I know, will go and see 12, 15 movies just to try and make sure that those last ones that they get to fill are the ones that they really feel are the most deserving. I think this is a very broken way. I wish this wasn't the way it worked, because I mean certainly the major trades should be reviewing everything. Everything that gets into a major festival like Cannes should be getting a review. There just isn't the money for that, and that doesn't happen anymore. So realistically, what then ends up happening is that a lot of time they trade on the goodwill of the freelance reviewers like me to go and find things, to go and take the time out of our day for which we might not get paid, because if we go and see a movie that we then decide not to review, I mean that's the only way I get paid. So there's lots of sort of structural problems with the way freelance film criticism works. But one of the things that it would be really helpful for us, I think, for you guys to understand, is that there isn't a huge pool of reviews there available to you. So anything that you can do to make our lives easier, to make your sales agents' lives easier, is really appreciated.
And in that context, maybe I should mention that many of the films that are reviewed, especially in the trades, are viewed by links and not on the big screen nowadays.
Yes, I mean, I think it was interesting what Sébastien was saying as well about Inside the Yellow Cocoon Shell. That was also one, because it's such a long film, again, from a first-time director, so, an unproven track record, that I know a lot of filmmakers are very resistant to the idea of their films being sent out to critics in advance on links. But I I am a huge champion of the theatrical experience. I believe in seeing things on the big screen whenever possible. It's why I spend most of my life at film festivals. But the pragmatic benefits of sending out your film on a link and of letting go a little bit of that preciousness that you want your film to be seen on the big screen is important. And even sometimes it will be a case of I will watch, because even now, for example, with Venice coming up, it's such a huge festival, I'm receiving a lot of links for films that are in the sidebars that I just won't get a chance to see on the ground because I am just one human being and I can only be in one place at one time. And so I'm receiving a lot of those, and there are a few of them that I will be checking out, and maybe I will, this has happened in the past, you know, I'll get into like 10 minutes into it and I'll realize this is a really fantastic film and I actually want to make the time to see it on the big screen on the Lido. So there are lots of different ways that having a screener really does help the critics.
And you want your film to be reviewed and published as soon as possible also. That's another key thing. You know, to have the review is great and we all fight for that, but you want the review to be out as soon as the world premiere has occurred, because then we need to do the sales, and we have like a window of 2 days maybe when distributors are still in the festival, when we can catch them and to create the buzz. So we absolutely need that review to be out ASAP.
How often do you shelve a review, Jessica?
How often do I shelve?
Yeah.
You mean?
Sometimes what Sebastian mentioned, that a film is being reviewed but not published.
That's just down to me being really slow and lazy. Sorry about that. No, I don't think we don't ever shelve reviews for release. I mean, certainly not at a big festival like that. A lot of it actually does genuinely come down to the schedule of the person who's reviewing it. So sometimes we're always made very aware by the sales agent or the PR people involved of like, we know that you saw this movie on Tuesday. It is now Thursday. You still haven't reviewed it. Can we very kindly? Yes. Yeah, yes, and I mean, and that's just difficult. That's just one of the pressures that we have on it. But we wouldn't ever, I mean, it's something that I'm seeing at Cannes should be reviewed, at least tied to Cannes. Sometimes just, again, through, for logistical reasons, it runs very soon after the festival, and I know that's a big downer, but yeah.
So Jim, could you please tell us a little bit about South by Southwest, especially about the selection process for international films, specifically from smaller territories?
Yeah, sure. So South by Southwest is a festival that's been around since '87, and it started as a music festival. The film festival was launched in '94, so it had become established as a place to find new bands initially, and so this idea of like emerging artists and emerging talent was kind of embedded in the company before the film festival was established. Can you hear me right? So that is that. So our chief like foundation is emerging filmmakers, like first and second time filmmakers, not exclusively by any means, but that's kind of like our bread and butter. In terms of international films, well, we receive thousands of submissions, so the bulk of our programming is drawn from submissions, and that's a process that's actually taking place right now. We're in our submissions period.
What percentage is American films and international films in the submissions?
To be honest, I don't have a clear number for you. It varies a lot. I mean, it's not non-English language international programming is international submissions are. It's kind of a guess, but I'm going to say like 20-25%. Don't quote me on that number, but I mean I would gauge it's around that. Because to be honest, we're primarily known for showing US independent feature films, but that is slowly changing, and I think year on year we're seeing an incremental increase in international submissions. I mean, the way we select them is much the same as we select any of our films. Like it's what do we like about it is the tone, the filmmaker's voice. We don't go into a film thinking about subject matter so much. It's not a question of like one of the filmmakers often ask, does this sound like the kind of film South by Southwest would show, without showing me the film? And it's like, well, I don't know. How did you tell the story? Like, we're quite agnostic about subject matter in that respect. So we're looking for new voices, and the way that emerges from the submissions process is just watching hundreds of films over the course of the submissions period. obviously, if we're coming to events like this, where there's works in progress happening, we can, see what's being developed, see what's, we're not really going to select a film based on a work in progress necessarily, but we, in terms of seeing what's coming up and following up, yeah, and the films that are kind of sticky in your head that stick around. I mean, the most obvious example I have is Cat in the Wall, which was a Bulgarian film that was here in 2018, I think it was, and that was programmed in 2020, which, given that the event was cancelled, turned out to not be such a great thing for obvious reasons, which we don't have to talk about right now. But that was very much a result of me meeting the filmmakers here and seeing their film or their work that they were doing on the film. But it wasn't like inviting from there. It was a kind of, it's a little more organic in that way. And ultimately, when it does become part of the curated program, it's because we saw it alongside everything else. There is an international section of the festival, the global section. It's small. It's intended to highlight films from different territories. So the ideal premise would be we'd show a film from Bulgaria, the Dominican Republic, wherever it happens to be, and then that would sort of cement the idea that we're looking for films from other territories outside the US, because there is a little bit of a misconception that we don't take films from certain regions, which is, it's simply not true. There's no rule or agenda in that respect. It's just a reality that the bulk of our programming comes from US submissions. But, as somebody who's focused on international programming, I am trying to change that. So we do that by finding interesting work, speaking at events, going to, works in progress, going to a lot of festivals, of course. It's really quite organic, but fundamentally it's from the fact we have a huge number of submissions to draw from.
You've mentioned work in progress sessions, so I'm curious to hear everyone's opinion about industry platforms and script labs, the pros and cons, and what do you think? Let's start with Sébastien.
I changed my mind. I changed my mind about work in progress a few years back, let's say 10 years ago, let's put it this way. I was against, as a sales agent, work in progress, because whenever your film is exposed, it used to be his first and last chance in a way. I think things have changed quite a lot, because now a lot of festivals are doing work in progress, so people start to be used to that. We just have to be careful who is attending those kind of events. I don't think it's for everybody, because you have to be very open-minded in what you see, and give it a second chance or third chance. And I think as a sales agent, we do that, of course, because this is our work. So now I'm fine with that. But now script labs, etc., I think it's very good for us. All those like Torino Film Lab are very important events for us to talk about the films which are presented, but also to discuss with the producers who are there about their other projects. It's usually actually a place where you talk about other projects too, when you have a coffee somewhere. So it's a good way, talking about myself, as a sales agent, because during a big festival, we be maybe concentrating on sales mostly. So outside the festival, focus, we can be really planning for the future and talk about the projects in a more peaceful way. So those are very important to us, and we try to do as much as possible of those.
Jessica, what do you think, especially about script labs and the results of these films?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak too much from the business side of it. There have been occasions, I have to say, when I have, I watch a lot of movies, and so sometimes there is a film, and I can feel it before I've even seen it in the credits. I can feel that this film has been workshopped to death. It's been labbed to death. And I can understand how exciting it is as a filmmaker to have all these opportunities to get all this feedback on your project. But sometimes, and I'm not saying always, and I think this is a massive generalization, even just sometimes it can sort of make you believe that there's a way your film should be, that is different from the way it would have been without those panels, without that mentorships, all of which is very well-meaning and all of which is trying to get you the best deal that you can. But I think one of the striking things already that has been said, like, you know, from Marie talking about divinity and Jim talking about the selection process for South by Southwest, and Sébastien talking about his safe place thing, is how all of those things are about the distinctiveness of the films. They're not about this is the type of film that we're looking for. This, you know, that certain films from certain regions should be about certain themes. It's a gut thing, and it's a you know, a distinctiveness thing. So sometimes I feel that those labs can knock the distinctive edges off your project because they're wanting to sort of give it the easiest life. But actually, if it is the kind of film that you are passionate about, and oftentimes if it's your first film, whatever, I would say, you know, pick the two labs, pick whatever it is that you feel are going to be the most nurturing of your vision of it, and not necessarily going along with everything that you're told to make it into a kind of a template film, because those are not what the good people are looking for. Yeah, there isn't a formula. And the good people, of whom we are all for, of course, are not looking for that. So,
Jim, do you have any industry platforms in South by?
No, and in fact, like it's not. We have no market. We have no labs. There's nothing like that at all. It's purely. Well, actually, that's not quite true. There's a conference, and there are panels, and there's some workshops and things, but there's no like. I mean, I'm not the right person to speak about this particular aspect of it, but maybe you are, I don't know. But for somebody going to South by Southwest to do business, it's a pretty immersive. You have to find your people, so it's a challenge. But I really want to echo this point that Jessica just made about the labs, though. I mean, it's not so much that they're not a bad thing for filmmakers, but I do think that one of the luxuries of working for a festival is that we can just show things that we like for whatever reason. And it's usually, the other thing too is that people work at film festivals, and some of us are weirdos with weird tastes and interests, and you know, like the thing we're looking for is something that we haven't seen before, and your unique vision, and it's a challenge because you still want to have a career and you want to be able to, you know, benefit from this over the long haul, but we want to see that weirdo film that's not told like other films we've seen. And so I think that labs are really good for, I guess, developing like a support network, and putting your work out there and making connections, and that's all fantastic. But
yeah, finding your tribe, it's important.
Yeah,
labs are also a way for festivals to retain talent within their own house, because if you look at the way we're being filmed, yeah. So, but the way some festivals have developed like institutes to like bring up talent, which is a fantastic initiative, but it's also, it serves them well. It's not just pure charity that they're doing. It like they know that these people are coming back to them, and they can retain talent and like innovative new voices.
True, yeah.
I do think there's an exception to like and that's for producers. Producers' labs are fantastic, I think, because if you work with real innovative talent, but you're just lacking the means, then all the producing labs that I've like heard of or like that I know friends have participated in have been like extremely helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that. I think absolutely from a business perspective and producers and making those networks, which is really important. It's just maybe the creative aspect outside of it, which I don't necessarily have a huge love for.
And also, like, I mean, when we're watching film, did that just die? Yeah. When we're watching films for programming purposes, I don't really care what labs it went through. It doesn't matter to me, like, how it was made. It's in that first viewing, at least. It's just a question of the film itself in its pure raw form is what we're interested in. I mean, if it's gone through labs and we love it, it's from that first pure moment, it's irrelevant. It's just the film we love.
Yeah, but again, it's a way for you to kind of filter specific projects that have been selected by festivals.
In my experience, speaking specifically from me, I don't think that really matters either. I don't think that's something. I mean, certainly if we've seen a film has gone through a certain lab, it's like, okay, you know, we've shown some interesting work with that connection in the past, so maybe let's see what's going on. But I don't think it has an advantage over anything else in terms of like selection, and I don't really I've never really had that experience myself, but I'm sure you would have a different answer from different festivals.
No, I mean, I can share that we have a lab in Jerusalem. It's held by the Sam Spiegel Film School, and the quality is quite good. And we have this, there are a lot of films that are developed there, and obviously I'm representing the festival, so we are watching the final films that are produced. So it's always a bit tricky because sometimes I don't like the film and I won't select it, and it creates some, you know, not tension, but discomfort with the people from the lab. So I have one nice experience. I remember receiving a link from the lab of a film, a Hungarian film, and I was sitting. It was already like 8 p.m. in my office, and I said, "Okay, let's watch the film." And the film was called Son of Saul, and it was a masterpiece. So I think some labs do produce interesting results, and it really depends on the project. Marie, I want to start the other way with the next topic, which is the streamers. You're coming from the US, so the streamers play a very significant role over there. Not only, but they're mostly based there. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your work with selling to streamers? You don't have to mention the names if you don't want to, but what are the tendencies nowadays with streaming companies?
Sure. So just before I dive into that, there's two ways you can sell a movie to a streamer. You can sell a movie as an original, which means that it will be branded under the streamer's name, or you can sell a movie, like I was saying earlier, as a pay-one window, which means that it will be a Utopia released movie, and then after it's been in theaters and on TVOD, it goes onto one of those platforms. So in the US, I work mostly with that model, and when we have international rights, I'm open to selling it to different territories, whether that's an original or not. We had a movie called Shiva Baby, which we released a couple of years ago, premiered at South by, and then we distributed the film in the US, and then we sold to HBO in the US. And for all the international territories, we sold it to Mubi. That was one of the first films they had on their platform, and it became one of their biggest success on the platform. Now, things are getting a little complicated for streamers and for independent cinema, because what we've seen in the past year is a series of mergers from these huge American studios. So Warner Brothers bought HBO, and now they fired the entire HBO team. So now HBO think that they're only gonna whatever. But we're only gonna do originals. And the same thing happened with Showtime and Paramount. Showtime is folding into Paramount, and they're not buying movies independently. The HBO and Showtime were, for us, one of the biggest art house supporters, which leaves us a little exposed as to what risk we can take when we look at a film. And we also know, sadly, that in the US, they're not extremely open to subtitles. So every time we buy a foreign film, we have to evaluate its potential in terms of not only how it will reach its audience, but whether or not the streamers will be interested or not. So it's a bit difficult because it impinges on us being an independent distributor, truly, because we have to think ahead and start guessing, will they like it or not? But we do take our own decision, but as an economic factor, that's something that we have to take into consideration when we buy a film.
Jim, do you get to work with streamers when you're selecting films for South by?
I mean, typically, one thing I should say is that it's South by Southwest Film and TV Festival. So a lot of the films, a lot of the projects that appear as part of the episodic programming, they will arrive via streamers, or that's how they will. They're not necessarily coming from open submissions in the same way. In terms of like the films themselves, I mean, I don't personally work with streamers. The films come in, we watch them. I mean, there's this like luxury of just watching the films in that way. And when it comes to decision making, well, yes, there are certainly situations where we will look at a film, we'll notice that it's from a certain streamer and it's been submitted as part of open submissions, and then the question becomes, well, do we give that film a slot knowing it already has its support, or do we give it to this other film that you're considering maybe they deserve a chance over the other one? So it's not really something where the conversations that happen with streamers are more to do with the larger studio films that we show or the episodic programming. But for me, I don't work with them directly at all. These are all factors you take into consideration once you've seen the film and liked it, and then you can weigh all this stuff up against each other. But in that first instance, not really.
Jessica, no, I'm curious to ask. For example, if you ever published like a very bad review and got like a backlash from a streamer or something?
No, from specific directors, no, yes, but I don't think in general from the streamers. I mean, I would defend certainly the editorial policy at Variety as regards as regards the reviews. We are very independent, and I have never once actually been told I can't say something because it's going to offend Warner Brothers or it's going to offend Netflix or something. So actually, I don't. That hasn't really occurred. Although I have written some pretty stinking reviews in my time. So, I think actually more what I'm suddenly learning. So I'm a very junior baby programmer, nothing like Jim, but I programmed a festival for the first time last year, the Belfast Film Festival, and I'm doing it again this year. And so actually, as Marie was saying before, when we were talking before, there was something about like going into it with this I knew absolutely nothing. I was a real idiot about programming when I suddenly was programming this festival. And I went into it with this great, like, high bravado about, like, so I'll just bring anything, because I didn't know any better. I was just basically, like, coasting on beginner's luck and ignorance. And one of the things that actually I discovered early on, and I'm probably going to be shooting myself in the foot hugely, but that there was one particular Netflix film that we were very interested in bringing, because it had Irish associations. And even just through the process of doing that, which, I mean, really, it's a small festival, it didn't mean a huge amount to them, but it was a nice bonus thing, I thought, like that there would be a couple of screenings of this film on a big screen in Belfast. And it was just to realize just how monumentally uninterested they seemed to be in the theatrical release. It was just really difficult to get an answer out of them, and we ended up managing to program the film, but not in the way that we'd wanted to. And so it was kind of an eye-opener on that level. I mean, I already knew it in my heart. I think we all know in our hearts that Netflix is not particularly interested in theatrical and would rather theatrical just went away, and festivals as well, for that matter. So yeah, just to have that actual practical experience of it was a kind of a steep learning curve.
Sébastien, when you strategize for a foreign language film, do you even consider approaching streamers or including them in your strategy?
Yes, of course. I think the discussion about streamers changed drastically over the last 10 years. Before, when we were getting on board on the film and talking with a producer and a director about potentially selling the film to Netflix, it was almost like a bad word. It was like, okay, are you ready to potentially have a discussion with a streamer? And no, it's normal, You will deal with a streamer like you would deal with a distributor, and that's what we do, When we think about a film, it might be for a distributor, it might be for a streamer, it might just go for festivals in some territories. I think we cannot talk generally. We need to talk about regions in that case. A streamer would buy before mostly the world, if one territory was gone, they wouldn't be interested. No, it's not the case anymore. And if we talk about Netflix, now you can deal with Netflix in Southeast Asia, for instance, when they would buy a film specifically for that market. It has to do with the different countries and regions are not
nowadays,
at the same pace.
It changed.
Nowadays, if we talk about the US, it's mostly, tell me if I'm wrong, but most AVOD is like really blooming, while TVOD, SVOD is like going down. In some territories, SVOD is still strong, but potentially it would be AVOD at that point. Then it depends also what is the strategy of a streamer in a particular region. Let's say India, for instance, at some point they really want to invest in the countries. They would buy a lot and for a lot of money. And the year after, when it's not maybe the priority, then the acquisition is draining. So it really depends on the region. So I think we just have to be, every film is different. But then it's also about the region and when we put the film in the market. Is there a need in Southeast Asia for those kind of films? If there is, then the streamer would be interested. When do we approach a streamer, as you were asking? I think we need to find, and I'll take the example of the Camerados film. If I talk about a Vietnamese film of 3 hours without anything, as selling points, of course they wouldn't even return my call. So I need to build on, on the film, getting some big awards, etc., and then I can show them also, why is that film different and why they should go for it. Maybe the discussion starts to be a bit different as well. But I think it's really regional now, instead of talking about the world. Yeah.
And 10 years ago, it was about the world.
It was the world. Basically, it was schizophrenic because you had to, because it's Netflix again, and you had offers from distributors in some countries. You are in a festival in Cannes, for instance, and if you need to get back to a distributor within hours or maybe 24 hours, but no more, because then they will put their money into another film. But if we would close one territory, even like a small territory, then we could jeopardize the big sale to Netflix. So we're in this situation trying to get an answer from Netflix, holding the offers on that side, and at some point taking a decision. I think it's less true nowadays, and of course, you're interested to know what a streamer is, if a streamer would be interested for the world, but the reality is they probably won't be interested. But regionally, yes. So you can do, here a distribution deal with a distributor with a theatrical release in another territory. It would go directly to Netflix, and in some territories it would be maybe a festival carrier.
Which makes your life easier in a way.
Yeah, it's a different setup, and I don't know if it makes the life, because
it's a lot of work.
The life easier would be to sell to the
but
streamer.
when working with the filmmaker, obviously the producer and the filmmaker, they want to have their films shown on the big screen, and so it allows you some flexibility with that. I think.
Of course, but I think the most important thing is also to explain to a producer your choice, why you're going that way with this specific deal, for instance. Because it comes from somewhere. But if you don't explain a bit the background, it might be an abrupt decision like suddenly, while you've been talking to distributors and you realize that maybe there is not a theatrical potential in that territory, and maybe a streaming is
a good option.
Yeah.
So our next topic, the last one before we move on to the questions from the audience, is the Oscar Foreign Language International category. Marie, can you tell us a little bit how significant the launch for the Oscar is?
For us as a US distributor, we worked on Holy Spider last year, which also played at your festival.
Yeah, and Ali was in our jury this year.
Okay, amazing. For us, that was very helpful because it was a way to draw attention to the film. It's an Iranian film about a serial killer. It's a very graphic and violent movie. So it was always going to be heavy lifting for us to bring attention to it. But through, the first round, the fact that it was first it was banned from Iran, which is something that we used to our advantage. Then sadly, the events in Iran happened, so it also brought attention to the film. But then when the film was shortlisted, we started to appear in every prediction and magazines, and these are things that really help us not only for the audience, but also to me. For me, it was very helpful because I ended up selling the film to Netflix, which was absolutely not a given when we picked up the movie in Cannes. So that was helpful. But in terms of sales, I don't know if that is applicable.
Sebastian, if a film is selected as a country's representative, does it help?
The impact on international is very low, to be honest. I think it has an impact when you are among the 10 at the end, really nominated, shortlisted. Shortlisted, yes, it definitely has an impact on international. But I think the only impact when the film gets selected is to potentially, if you don't have a US distributor on board already, is to get this US distributor who is more sensitive to those kind of, having an Oscar potential film in their lineup. But then also they cannot, if you talk about middle-sized US distributor, maybe they have one or two already that are championing, so they're going to tell you, yeah, but I cannot have 3 films competing. It doesn't make sense, which is true, So it's a challenge. It's really. I don't think it has a big impact. It has an impact for US sale, not necessarily for international.
Can you tell us how much is the cost of the Oscar campaign for such a film like Holy Spider?
I mean, we stopped because we ended up not being nominated. We were shortlisted, but so we missed the last 1 month of the race when the campaign even further increases, because that's when you really need to to tell every voter that your film is better and more impactful than the others. But I think you can start with $250,000, which is also what is gonna be a problem for a lot of US distributors, because they're gonna be yeah, it's a great film, it's been selected, but I don't want to spend it can go to $500,000, and we're still within the reach of very small independent campaigns, and then it can go way beyond that. But I've never had that kind of budget, so I don't know.
Would you like to add anything about this topic?
Well, I will say that anything that is submitted, this is the wrong way around for this to work, but anything that is submitted by its country for as its choice has a much better chance of getting reviewed. Oftentimes, I think obviously that should have already been reviewed, and it should be one of the things that is factoring into whether or not it gets selected. But it is one metric that I know that Variety uses. So yeah.
It's not really a factor in the way we program, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yet.
Okay. Hi, Florian. Okay, questions from the audience. We have a microphone for you.
Hi, how are you doing? I'm here representing Show Me Television, which is a fairly new streaming service. And I'm just curious about what a micro streaming service would do to get your attention, to be able to get films from you, content.
That depends of what type of film you're trying to get. If it's a new film. Okay, so everything. So library titles and catalog. Okay. So I'm usually open to new partnership. The issue I've had with micro streamers is that usually because you're launching, you don't have money to put forward minimum guarantees, and I can't sell you films for free. But if we agree on okay. No, but I'm usually open. There's not. It's not very hard to get my attention. My email is on Cinendo. I try to reply to everyone who writes.
I personally don't work in that sector. That's their thing. I also work with Legacy Inspired Films, which is a studio. And once again, building content right now is impossible with blocks, writers, scribe, do you think that you can give us somebody that might want that informed?
But are you launching in the US or sorry? Okay.
Okay, well, we can chat after the panel.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I wonder what the role of a film publicist is in regards. I think I would assume Cercamon works with a film publicist for every film, and then I wonder if a film publicist is also key to getting the reviews that the film wants or the filmmakers want.
I would say it depends on the festival where the film is launching. For a big festival, yes. To be truly honest, when the film is launching in a smaller festival, I would rather reach out to Jessica directly, you know.
What do you call for example, Locarno? Is it a smaller festival?
So it's difficult to answer that question, like in general, because I think it depends on when the film comes from. Sometimes you have some subsidies as well, like coming from government or institutions. And I think, if we can use that for the publicity, it can be good, But I think, and then it depends also on the publicists, because publicists are very different. And this, in that case, I won't give any names, but it's true. You have some very good publicists that have a real impact, So it's difficult to give. If I start to give examples, then I give names. So it's and some others where the impact on was not that significant to me. So I think you need to choose wisely the publicist and see if that makes sense for the festival. I don't know if that really answers your question, but
Jessica, you want to add something about working with publicists?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the publicists are certainly the first line between a film and the critic. I know a lot of really good publicists and really good publicists who are absolutely doing this for the right reasons, and they're passionate about your film, and they will go to the ends of the earth to get it in front of me and to try and hopefully get a review in Variety, whatever it is. However, I will say that there are some unscrupulous ones who will, and I learned this from a publicist friend of mine, because sometimes publicists themselves are pitching to be able to represent a particular film. There's 3 publicist companies that see a film and they know that it's going to be a hot ticket, so they all want to get onto this film. And one of the things that you can absolutely disregard any publicist who tells you that they can definitely get you a trade review. There have been cases where they have done that, where they're like, the production itself will say to my friend, the good publicist, well, we're going to go with these guys because they've guaranteed us a Variety review. That's absolute bullshit. There's no publicist who has that power. So, it is like anything, like with your sales agent, like with the distribution network that they'll then bring to it. It is actually about relationships and it's about chemistry, and you will find, hopefully, that at some point you start working with a publicist. And I know a lot of publicists who have long-standing relationships with certain filmmakers just because they were there at the beginning, and that there's a kind of a loyalty there. And there are some who are, much bigger companies. Like sometimes your film actually does belong with one of the bigger companies that's going to sort of put this big team behind it. I think in general, I can see a lot of filmmakers almost regarding the publicists as the enemy, and that's not the case if you choose the right one.
And I think you really need to establish the goals with the publicist. For me, I always say we want to be aware of what's going on, but not on a daily basis. But as soon as you have information through WhatsApp, for instance, share it with us, because we're going to use that in the festival. Like if the publicist meets Jessica at the end of a screening and say, "Oh, I saw your film, I loved it." That's enough information for me then to spread the word.
But I never do that.
Okay, we are
I can
out
just
of
pretend.
time. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
have to finish. Yeah.